So with that in mind, I'd like to invite our panelists back up to the stage, and here is your opportunity to raise the questions in your mind that you think are important in the context of monitoring, control, and surveillance, and addressing IUU, and ensuring that technology is fit for purpose and that we're able to achieve what we want to achieve when we apply technology as in different contexts. So Shin, I think you were the first up.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm Yan from the Marine Stewardship Council. I have a question for Gary. So with these technology enabling a lot of the data become perhaps more transparent, often at the MSC we get a lot of questions from buyers. Oh wow, we're able to now track vessels. But what they're not understanding is when they detected, maybe vessel fishing in illegal fishing zone, what are the next steps can they be taking? Do they report to the authority? So yeah, really interested in understanding from IMCS perspective, are there capacity building and even guiding buyers that are perhaps interacting with some of these fishing activity or helping to verify activity and supporting them in contributing to regulating perhaps? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really good point. There are so many people watching what happens in the maritime environment at the moment, and the law enforcement community in maritime is actually quite a small component. It's a part of fisheries management. It doesn't operate in isolation, so it contributes to overall management. We've said in New Zealand that of the 180 fishery officers we have throughout New Zealand, we can't be everywhere. We've got the 4th largest EEZ in the world. And what we say to the people of New Zealand is there are 5 million people there. You're the eyes of the community, and this is a resource that we all need to protect, so you need to contribute. And that goes to industry as well. It goes to NGOs, everybody that's monitoring. If you see something that you think is a discrepancy, you need to let us know because we can't see everything. And we only have a certain type of technology available to us in New Zealand. It's very good, but there are others out there that might see things that we're not seeing. And we don't have the degree of access to satellite technology in New Zealand that other parts of the world do. So yes, there is a global community responsibility to protect marine resources wherever they are in the world. Hopefully that answers that.
That does, perhaps more on IMCS's role in capacity building and perhaps raising awareness on the next steps when buyers or the supply chain had found issue with upstream. Are there actions that they could take? Is it part of the IMCS network in helping to educate and provide guidance around that?
Well, this is where the partnership that we've talked about between IMCS and SAFET comes in. And SAFET has that expertise in the relationship with technology providers. Our expertise is in the relationship that we have with law enforcement, marine law enforcement throughout the world. Our members are practitioners, if you like, but they're also regional fisheries management organisations, IGOs, we have academia. So we're actually quite a broad membership base, but all with the same objective in mind, and that's combating IUU. So we can act as a matchmaker in working with our partner agencies and bring people together. It's important that, I think, identifying the solutions for our members has to be, as I said, cost effective, sustainable, and it has to be fit for purpose. And sometimes we're seeing examples of that not being the case, where people are coming in and saying, here's the solution, this is going to fix everything for you. And there's not that degree of consultation beforehand. We have that expertise in the secretariat team that we have at the network and in our wider group where we can provide advice and guidance to tech providers.
Thank you very much.
I think that's a really important point that brings us back to your statement about it's e tangata, e tangata, e tangata. It's the people. And as someone who I am is what is referred to as a mad keen fisho in New Zealand. And one of the things that always impressed me about New Zealand is there's such a conservation ethic among the recreational fishing community that nothing goes unnoticed. And it's very often the people, it's, you know, those other fishermen that are out there watching each other saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. And there's a very effective Operation Game Thief or something like, it's an 800 number that fishermen can call that's far superior to any satellite technology that you can apply in that particular context. So, I think the role, just getting at the main point of my way too long comment here, is that the role that IMCS Network plays in building the capacity of enforcement professionals around the world, helping them understand the breadth of the issues that are involved and how to address those issues, is a critical component to helping build the people up to allow them to use the tools that we talk about in forums like these. So, next question.
Thank you. My question is to Dustin and the Smart Pass technology. I find the concept very nice and simple. But my question is, does this recognize the individual vessel or just makes the count? Do you know which vessel is passing through? Does it read the registration or the name of the vessel?
Thanks for that question. So that may be a future possibility with this technology, but at present day, just based on camera technology as well as how well the algorithm performs, it's not able to register individual vessels. However, there is some work being done in being able to classify vessel types. So, for example, this is implemented right now in early stages in Indonesia, in Lampung province, and we're working on training the algorithm to recognize different vessel constructions, because the different vessel constructions look different from just a faraway view kind of shape perspective, and they also construct vessels differently for targeting specific fisheries. So one type of construction might be more geared towards gill nets with blue swimming crab, and another might be a larger, bigger vessel that is more of like a modified trawl. And so by being able to use that vessel classifier, you're able to really dig down and get better data. But as of yet, we're just not there yet, it seems, with being able to recognize individual vessels.
Thank you. Thank you, Nestor.
And it's a really important point, and I think, you know, one of the technologies that was talked about the other day was the radar harvesting, looking at the signatures of radars, and there's increasingly more and more ways we can identify individual vessels. And Gary, I seem to recall a couple of years ago, because vessels very often change their names, or they'll paint over the IMO numbers or the vessel names to try and avoid responsibility or potential consequences in any given context. And I seem to recall there was a case a while back where they were able to take images of a vessel that had changed its name, and because of the antenna placement and because of the location of particular equipment on the deck, they were able to say, well, yeah, that's actually this vessel that we caught illegally fishing in this other region. I can't remember the details of that, but it's an example of how the technology will get there. And we should be sending that message. It's like, don't think just because you're out there painting over your bow that you're going to get away with something in a particular region.
Yeah, there's very good open source information around, like ShipSpotter, where people all around the world will take photographs of vessels in port and that sort of thing. And we have a look at those, and we rely on our folk when they're down in the port to get very high resolution profile images, both port and starboard, of fishing vessels, particularly if they're an international foreign flag vessel coming into our port, so that we can then use that ability to match it where they are a suspected IEU vessel that is changing names, changing registration, One vessel that was boarded as a part of a IUU operation in the Southern Ocean some years ago had 46 different flags in its flag locker. It had documentation for 12 different vessels on board. So they will use a range of documentation, whoever boards them, and say, well, this is who I'm flagged to. And it's really difficult to verify there and then. These people are professional at what they do. The true IEU vessels are absolutely professional at what they do. So we have to be just as smart or smarter. And that's where technology helps.
And before long, we're going to have Tinder for IUU vessels. You know, you don't want to be swiped right on that. Yes, Greg.
Thank you. My question is for Dustin. Have you looked at thermal cameras?
It's funny that you asked that because I actually was going to speak about that briefly in my presentation, but I had to cut it out because it was just a little bit lengthy. But yes, that's something that we're interested in looking into. We work closely with several tech providers, but I know with conversations with C-Vision AI, that is something that's definitely worth considering, of course, during nighttime to increase the accuracy and precision of counting vessels at night. So if you're coming from a perspective of somebody who's already operating the space, I'd love to follow up with you afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working in several locations where people are using outboard engines that really show up. We're using thermal scopes on patrol boats to be able to identify outboard engines, right? So when you're on patrol, where's the boat? Heat signature doesn't lie. And so there's just working in some areas, and certainly love to talk with you more about whether or not your technology might work in some of the places we're working. And while I'm talking, I might just add for the question about working with the IMCS network, I would encourage industry to understand who the players are within the area that you're working, within your coastal state. You might find nonprofits that are also working on monitoring, control, and surveillance, one of them being, for example, WildAid. And there are opportunities where we are working with the government to strengthen those reporting requirements, developing those tip lines, developing those lines of communication, making procedures, helping people understand, how do I report something? How do I do that anonymously? And then working with the government to put those processes in place. So the IMCS network is a fantastic location to get you in, and then you might end up working with some of us in the nonprofit sector that are working with on the MCS side of the house trying to stop IUU fishing. So just quick side note. Thanks for letting me get on my crab pot.
Next question.
I have a question. Thanks for the presentations. Chris Cusack, EDF, and this question is for Dustin. Dustin, where do you think that SmartPass could have the biggest impact on the management of fisheries worldwide?
Yeah, so as I briefly touched on in the presentation, it's fairly cost efficient to get a glimpse into what's being caught on a per trip or per vessel level. However, in many small-scale fisheries around the world, we just don't really have a good measure on effort, how many trips are moving to and from port. And so starting with a baseline of almost no data or just sampling a small amount of trips and getting an indication into how many times they go out to sea in a year, if you're starting from that baseline of very little data, and then you're implementing a system that potentially, if the weather's holds up okay, you might have 100% accuracy in terms of counting traffic. That is huge. And really good data is the foundation for good science. Without data on effort, you really can't build up very well any strong sort of stock assessments. So I think it's a big part of scaling the science in the small-scale fisheries around the world.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I'll go again if no one else, as people think about their questions. Gary, recently, during the UNGA General Assembly meeting in New York here a couple of weeks ago, there were a couple of pretty big announcements as it relates to funding of the Joint Analytical Cell. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this is a coalition of nonprofits that are putting themselves in a place, or I mean, I should allow Gary to talk to it. I'll just say the Joint Analytical Cell and allow Gary to talk about it. Would you mind talking a little bit about some of the initiatives you see coming from there in the sense of where that might work, where that funding that's coming from the UK and Canada and hopefully some point in the near future from the United States as well might be useful as we, enabling some of these emerging technologies?
Thank you. Look, the Joint Analytical Cell is an initiative that we're immensely proud of. It's a relatively recent development, and we've got Damien here from the IMCS Network Secretariat, who's been one of the key players in getting that up and running. It's a partnership with non-profits who bring monitoring and surveillance capability, and working with the IMCS network are able to provide intelligence packages and analytical packages to developing nations around the world who would otherwise not have access to that high degree of that richness of information that can be brought through the JAC. We started off with only about 3 non-profits involved. There's a lot of interest now, but it's fair to say anybody that's interested in participating and contributing, we do it as a free service to law enforcement around the world. So this is to fill in the gaps where they can't naturally afford to do it themselves. But it helps provide them with a picture of what's actually happening in their jurisdiction. Because if you don't know that you have an issue, then you don't know whether you need a solution to that issue. And once you identified the issue, then you can start to think, well, how do we treat it? Is it resources? Is it physical resources? Is it resources on the water or in the air? Or is it a technology solution that brings all of that together? So that's part of the fundamentals in building a case for putting together a end-to-end solution. And that's one of the things that I've sort of seen over the last couple of days, is a lot of the solutions are part of a technology solution. Not all of it has been an end-to-end package, which is quite often what is needed by developing nations. A one-stop shop from detection, and Smart Pass I think is a great thing, because in New Zealand we have people standing at the boat ramps with clipboards and watching how many boats go out and how many come in. Smart Pass I think would be a great thing for us, but we also balance that with having fishery officers or volunteers looking at the catch on board, so you know what the catch limits are. You can extrapolate from that. Well, that boat went out with 4 people on board. They all caught the limit for the very species. We can extrapolate the extraction rate from that area. So small-scale technology through to full suite of solutions, it's got to be fit for purpose. I keep pushing that message.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. And I think that message of fit for purpose is really important, as well as we've heard in a number of presentations over the last couple of days about the need for incentives. And one of the incentives around compliance is you want the costs of compliance to be less than the costs of the consequence. And when you reach that point, then if it's just easier to comply than potentially face a fine or get thrown in jail, then that's where you've hit the sweet spot. And whether that's achieved through technology or through just general effort. And just a brief story, and WWF would hate that I'd be telling you this, but I have been an illegal fisher. Now, let me preface that by I was 9 years old, and my father used to drag me out on the boat into one of the bays, and he would fish illegal gill nets. And he, of course, had me picking the fish from the gill nets. Now, when I went home after doing this one time, and my mother confronted my father and says, well, where'd you guys go all night last night? And he's like, well, I took the boy out and we set some gill nets. And she was like, you what? And, because she was not happy that her 9-year-old son was going out and doing illegal activity that could ultimately not only land her husband in jail, but get me in trouble as well. And so in that case, the cost of compliance, i.e. my mother, was a lot more harsh or a lot less than the potential implications of actually getting caught by a fisheries officer out on the water. And around that time, you know, things like the infrared technology and stuff was coming available, and you know, you can put a lantern on the deck while you're picking the net and that kind of thing. If you don't, you're going to get stung by a stingray or something like that trying to pull it out. So the reality is it got too hard for my father to continue doing that, and we ended up burning all the gill nets one day. But it's a good example of how you put those incentives in place, and it can drive behavior on the water. So the next question.
Hi, my name is Maddie Green. I'm from the University of Tasmania. Thank you for that story, Bubba. That's funny. My question's for Gary and IMCS. Love what you guys do, and I love your comments about tools being fit for purpose. I guess I'm curious about while you're in a room full of technology providers and people thinking of solutions, and your high-level, you know, view of the space, what are things that you would like to see? You would like to see people thinking about building? I guess what's on your wish list? Yeah, just some thoughts around that.
Thank you. And just say, but statute of limitations is expired, so you can sleep well now, mate. I think the thing for me is if you have a product, you need to do the research beforehand when going to an end user and making sure that your product fits their need and not that they have to adapt the way they work to work with your product. It should support the way they work and enhance, and as I said in my presentation, be a force multiplier. You know, we have limited people on the ground. If a technology solution enables them to work more efficiently, more effectively, have greater awareness of what is happening in their environment, the data side of it is just hugely problematic. Just trying to go through that as a one-person analyst, as we've got in a number of countries, this is where I think AI is quite exciting. I'm not going to be around to see it come to fruition in the fisheries enforcement space because my time is nearing, but I think that's going to be a huge game changer, but the ability for people on the ground to use it is going to be problematic. You know, I struggle with understanding blockchain. I had to read Blockchain for Dummies. So AI is the next kid on the block, and that will change the way we work. But technology shouldn't change operational activity. It should support operational activity, and we as individuals need to be thinking, how can we work differently and what do we need to support that, not the other way around. So that's thematically, I think. Don't let technology drive the way we work. Let the user define how they want to work, and then the technology comes in to support that.
Yeah, I think that technology as support is a really important aspect of that. And did you have a follow-up?
No, that was me. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? I think everyone's stayed. It's 3 days now, and I think people are hitting a wall at this point. Well, I'd really like to thank our panelists for enlightening us on this particular aspect of it and bringing some really important points to light. So let's give our panelists a big round of applause as they exit the stage. And do take the time, take the opportunity. If you do have additional questions outside, the room here to please encourage conversation with Gary and with Dustin, and learn more about their experience, how you can get involved in IMCS network, and what you can learn about SmartPass. So thank you guys very much.